The time has come for Ian Garry's unbeaten record to end, and I think that MVP is just the right guy to get that done. So in this video, I'm going to lay out all the different areas that I think MVP has the advantage in this fight, and I'm going to lay out a few of the areas where Michael Page needs to be careful or he might be the one who ends up on the losing end of things. But before I get to all that, it's been a little bit of a tough road lately making content on these topics because there's been so many cancellations and changes, and it really does take a lot of time to put these videos together. So if you start down one path and then you have to cancel that, it's a lot of time wasted. And with that in mind, if you find that you enjoy the video, please give it a like. And if you're not subscribed to the channel, I'd love to have you here for future content, so please consider doing that. And as always, all the segments of the video will be timestamped down in the progress bar. So if you watched any of the videos where I've ever talked about Ian Garry, you'll know that I'm not his biggest fan. But even though that's the case, I am able to recognize that he is significantly talented, and he has absolutely earned the place that he holds in the division. But with that said, I think there are holes in Ian Garry's game that can be taken advantage of. And more than any other matchup, I have wanted to see how Ian Garry would fare against someone like MVP. So now that this fight is just around the corner, let's jump into all the different areas where I feel like MVP will have the advantage. Now, the interesting thing about many of the elements I'm going to cover is the fact that Ian Garry is often the one who has these advantages in his fights. And to kick things off, I'm going to start with the speed advantage. Ian Garry is very fast and he often uses that advantage against his opponents, but MVP is even faster. And I think once he's in there, it's going to be very difficult for Ian Garry to wrap his mind around that fact. And on top of the speed, one of the other areas that Ian Garry often has an advantage over his opponents is with his reach. But unfortunately for him in this fight, that's another area where MVP is going to steal that advantage away. Ian Garry will come into this fight with a 4.5-inch reach disadvantage. And while reach itself is very important, if you don't have good distance management, it's not going to help you that much. And here again in distance management, this is an area where I feel like MVP once again has the advantage. I am very curious to see how Ian Garry is going to manage somebody with a karate style like MVP. We all know that he wanted to face Wonderboy Thompson, but as I've said in other videos, I think that MVP is a much more dangerous and longer version of Stephen Thompson, and I don't think that Ian Garry has ever been in a situation where he has had to fight somebody who is just as tall, who is also longer, faster, and has the ability to dart in and out with attacks. Now, if all that wasn't enough, I would also have to give the power advantage to MVP. Ian Garry has shown on rare occasion that he does have knockout power, but Michael Venom Page has shown on many occasions that he has knockout power. And not only has he knocked people out, in the case of Evangelista Santos, he literally caved in his skull. So not only does Ian Garry have to worry about getting hurt in this fight, he has to be concerned about getting knocked out and possibly even injured badly if a big shot lands. So moving on, one of the other things that I think MVP is going to have the advantage in is experience. While Ian Garry certainly has had more time under the biggest stage of the UFC, Michael Venom Page has many more fights. And his first entry into the UFC against Kevin Holland showed that the big stage did not intimidate him. And in fact, if anything, he seemed to thrive on it. So when it comes to the situation of having been in the cage, standing across from many different types of fighters over the years, MVP has just been there and done that many more times. And I believe that experience is one of the major reasons why MVP also takes the next criteria, which is confidence. Before this fight was made, the impression I got from Ian was that he was ducking MVP. And I say that because he wanted to fight Stephen Thompson so badly at one point, but when MVP was brought up as an alternative to Stephen Thompson, the things that he said and the body language he gave off told me that he did not want that fight. But I do give him 100% credit for actually accepting the fight once the Colby option fell through. But when I listen to Michael Page's interviews, it's clear to me that he's coming into this with a lot of confidence. I don't feel like he thinks anything that Ian brings to this is going to be a major threat, or that it's anything he's never seen before. And I do believe that this confidence is going to enhance one of MVP's natural strengths when he fights, and that is unpredictability. Michael Page's unpredictability is one of the things that makes him so dangerous to fight and so hard to fight, because you never know what he's going to throw and from where he's going to throw it. And because of the speed and the reach that he has, he can hit you with things that are so fast and from such a distance that you don't have any chance to do anything about it. And I think it's going to be fascinating to watch that style against Ian Garry's, which is a much more traditional kickboxing-like style. So with all that said, I think that MVP is coming into this fight with the speed advantage, the reach advantage, better distance management, more power with his strikes, more experience, as well as the confidence that he needs to maximize his style. And one other thing that gives me confidence MVP should win this fight is the fact that he's well aware of one of Ian Garry's major weaknesses, and that is that Ian often struggles when he's put on his back foot. This was something that I noticed when I was studying Ian to do a video I did a few months ago, where I went back and looked at all of his fights to see whether or not I thought he was the real deal. If you haven't already seen that video, I will link it down in the description. But essentially, I noticed that when Ian Garry was pressured and put on his back foot, that's when he was at his weakest. Now, I will say that he spent a lot of time like that against Geoff Neal, and he did just fine. So there's no question that he is improving there. However, MVP and Geoff Neal are completely different fighters, and I believe that the back foot pressure that MVP can put on Ian Garry is going to be way different than that of Geoff Neal. Geoff Neal was not fast enough to do anything with Ian Garry's speed. But as I've said, I believe that MVP is faster than Ian Garry. So I think at a minimum, Ian Garry's going to have a much tougher time evading Michael Page than he did Geoff Neal. So while it's clear I believe most of the chips are stacked in MVP's favor in this fight, Ian Garry is no joke, and if MVP does not take him seriously, he's going to lose this fight. There are several challenges that Ian Garry's going to present to Michael Page that he had better be prepared for. First and foremost are Ian's calf kicks. Those are one of the most significant weapons that Ian has, and they are very destructive. When you look at what he did to Neil Magny's legs right out of the gate, it's no joke. And MVP's skinny legs likely are not going to be able to take many of those shots from Ian. I'm sure that Michael Page has a game plan for this, but if he doesn't execute it well, that's one way that Garry could shut him down. The other way that I could see Ian Garry winning this fight is by a decision, much like he did against Geoff Neal. After Garry's fight with Neal, he spoke about his game plan, and that was to basically avoid getting hurt. He knew how dangerous Geoff was, and so his game plan was to stay away, use his distance, his reach, and his speed, and simply rack up points. Now, as I've said, it's going to be much harder for him to do that against MVP. But if for some reason MVP comes in gun-shy in this fight, or doesn't go on the attack and put him on his back foot, I could see a scenario where Garry does the same thing again. And finally, I think one thing MVP should consider going into this fight is that Ian Garry may try to grapple more. Now, I have always believed that Ian Garry's grappling was incredibly weak, but he does claim that he has been working on it significantly. And Ian Garry is going to know that if he's ever going to try to out-grapple somebody, MVP is probably the best shot he has. So I can imagine a scenario where Ian Garry comes in very grappling heavy in this fight, with the idea of staying safe and winning on points. So when it comes to predictions for this fight, if I had to rank the different ways I see this fight going, half of me is seeing a lot of the ways that MVP will get a finish in this one, but the other half of me is feeling like Ian Garry is going to be able to just survive to a decision. But if I did have to rank them, I would say a decision for MVP would be my number one pick, followed closely by a TKO or KO finish. I do believe if Ian Garry is able to pull this one off, he would do it by a very close decision. And I really don't see much of an opportunity for him to finish MVP, especially in a 3-round fight. So those are my thoughts and my breakdown, but let me know down in the comments, what do you think about this fight? Do you agree with my assessment, or do you think I'm completely wrong and that Ian Garry's going to dominate and beat MVP? Once again, if you enjoyed the video, please make sure you give it a like and subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. Finally, I'm getting very close to my goal of 1,000 subscribers, and at that point, I will be doing a giveaway. I haven't talked about this much recently, and I'm not going to go into detail about it in this video, but if you want to learn more, there is a link down in the description. And with that, thank you all for being here, and I look forward to seeing you in the next video.